With me is Chief Farina from the Village of Fairport, Chief Mears, Town of Ogden, Chief Deputy Mike Fowler from the Sheriff's Office, and Chief Forsyth from the Town of Greece. This morning, 22 rescinding orders for parole violation warrants was sent to our Monroe County Jail here, releasing 22 prisoners. Of the 22, 17 of them were actually released. 5 of them are still being held on unrelated charges. This is all the result of the less is more law that was passed last Friday. And I can tell you, as the Chief of Police, who receives emails daily from Albany, I have yet to even receive what the law is other than what I have seen on TV. Apparently it has something to do with technical parole violations, that we will no longer hold people in custody for technical parole violations. What would a technical violation be? Someone violates their curfew, someone tests positive for the presence of drugs in their urine, they hang out with other felons. These are all little rules that we put in place to keep them on a straight and narrow lifestyle. We have found that when they start to violate those technical violations, that they end up going off and getting themselves rearrested. Those technical violations were a very good tool to keep somebody and to keep them straight and to keep them honest and to keep them out of jail. So today, with that governor's new law, the order came down again to release 22 prisoners from the Monroe County Jail. I can tell you that not one person standing here had any knowledge or notice that this was coming until after the fact that this had already happened. It is inconceivable the lack of communication and the lack of partnership that we have had from Albany, especially we're sitting here in the year 2021 with some of the most violent and out of control crime rates that something like this would take place. We are not in a position right now to release those 17 names, as we have just received that list in the last few hours. We are doing a risk assessment on who those prisoners are that have walked out the door today. There's notifications that potentially need to be made to family members, victims, witnesses, depending on what this individual has done. We are not talking about people with parking tickets. We are talking about convicted felons who have been released with no consideration for what the potential unintended consequences could be from this release. And I also want to make mention that of the 17 people that walked out of here, we have active investigations going on with some of those individuals where they are people of interest in other very serious crimes. They were being held here in our jail on a parole violation. They were off the street while the investigations proceeded. With that release, we have investigators out there right now tracking down some of those 17 so we can rearrest them and to bring them back on those charges that we had open investigations on. This would never have happened had somebody just come to us and gave us the list of names on who they intended to release. So we could have lodged those charges for these open investigations that we continue to work, and they wouldn't have walked out of our jail today. So we have some grave concerns of who was released and exactly what their backgrounds are. And in typical fashion, we are playing catch up to figure out who they are and what their backgrounds are and what, if any, threat they pose to our community, our families, our neighbors, victims, witnesses. These are all considerations that we're looking at right now. In closing, I just want to say at some point we will release those names, but again, we are not in a position to do that right now, as we too are trying to figure out who all was released today. We are not in a position to release those names, and again, we have some active investigations going on right now as we speak, trying to recapture some of those 17, and I can tell you these are some very serious crimes, okay? And this is beyond disappointing that New Yorkers would be treated like this. I'm almost embarrassed to be standing up here as a law enforcement official running all of our police departments, that we would have to stand here and talk about this. But this was not our doing, but unfortunately, we are going to end up having to deal with whatever the unintended consequences are, these 17. It's going to be the Gates Police, the Grease Police, it's going to be Fairport. We're the ones who are going to get stuck. If these guys go out and reoffend or do anything bad, it's all back on our doorstep. And I don't think that's fair. I can't believe that in 2021, this is how our government operates. It is beyond disappointing.
Chief, what are some of these original crimes, and what might some of these new crimes now under investigation be?
We're still gathering all that data, and I am not prepared to talk about what they are, but I can tell you it is very serious stuff that we're looking at. And again, this should never have went down like this. It should not have happened like this. But, you know, Albany, again, they have all our emails. You know, they email us every day with notices, notifications. But, you know, to this day, we have not gotten anything official from Department of Criminal Justice Services, the governor's office, and what the law is, or B, what they intended to do today. It's kind of upsetting to all of us. Would anyone like to add anything before?
Chief Forsyth, any of the names, have you heard of any of them? Any idea who some of these people might be? I ask because Greece is obviously has quite a few of them.
Yeah, we know the names of the people, but we don't want to get into the potential additional crimes that they may be responsible for. I know, certainly I would imagine the city of Rochester's got quite a few on that list that they're looking into, but at this point, you know, we're still going through that. And the Crime Analysis Center is assisting us with that.
For an idea of the gravity we're talking about, can you address any of that?
Well, I would imagine there's things from homicide on down is what my understanding may be.
And so, from what I understand of the law, and correct me if I'm wrong, but these are people who may have violated parole violations that were non-violent parole violations, correct? So my question is, I guess, you know, for those people who think, you know, if they did something non-violent to violate their parole, why is this such a big deal that these people are being released? What would you say to them?
Well, first of all, again, from what I had seen on the news, these were technical violations. People that had reoffended were not supposed to be part of this category, but as we see today, 5 of them obviously had reoffended and were being held on other charges. So that right there, how do we explain those 5 rescinding orders were issued when they're sitting in here on new charges, right? Technical violations are very important to us, okay? To our community, right? When somebody starts testing positive for drugs, when they start staying out till 11 o'clock at night, they're heading down the wrong path, right? And the whole purpose of those technical violations was to kind of wake them up and say, hey, stop doing what you're doing. We're going to hold you in custody for a week, 2 weeks, to kind of drive home that discipline issue, right? When you look at the Gates pub shooting in 2015, okay, David Allgood, he had a 9 o'clock curfew. He wasn't supposed to be in possession of a firearm. And a week before that mass shooting, he got arrested by the Rochester Police Department for an assault, and nobody violated him. Parole never violated him for that new charge. They let him back out, and then he did the mass shooting. So there's this whole thing about violating parolees has always been a little cloudy on exactly who gets violated and when it happens. But I can tell you, you know, we have some grave concerns about the new law. We were not in favor of it, but it is what it is. And you know, now we're going to have to deal with whatever the consequences are. Unfortunately, it's one less tool for our parole officers or our local law enforcement to take the bad guys off the street. Now, remember, these are convicted felons. These aren't misdemeanors. These aren't violations. These are people that have been convicted by a court of a felony, and many of them are violent felonies. Let me bring you back to March 2020, right? When Governor Cuomo decided to release parolees again that were sitting in all the jails across the state on parole violations, right? 50 prisoners walked out of here on a Friday night at 5 o'clock in March of 2020 with little notification to local law enforcement. Within days, 2 or 3 of those prisoners came to the town of Gates and broke into my stores, smashed windows out of gas stations and stole cigarettes. they reoffended on new felonies, right? More time that the state of New York, we taxpayers are going to pay to warehouse them because we didn't do them any favors by just letting them go. You're setting them up for failure. And we saw what happened in 2020 of the 50. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I can tell you a good handful of them went out there and reoffended and did more felonies, right? Which means eventually they're going to end up paying for those new felonies, which is more time in prison, which is going to cost the taxpayers more money. So we've been down this path before. Obviously, we're very concerned because we saw what happened when the 50 got let out in March of 2020.
One of the intentions of the law is to cut down on recidivism. Do you not believe that it will do that? Or?
Go ahead.
How do you cut down recidivism? By taking away any deterrence. You're taking away all the deterrence for committing crimes, and you expect it to cut down on recidivism? My message to the victims is Albany's not listening to you. There's a distinct pattern out of Albany that they don't care about victims of crimes. And that's what we've been seeing over the past few years. And the evidence is coming at us every single day. No matter how much we get up and talk about it, no matter how much we try to convince people that this is going in the wrong direction, just look at the crime that's happening on the streets. It's going in the wrong direction, and Albany is not listening. Not listening to anybody that's involved in this right now. The victims Albany does not care about the victims.
Could you ballpark at all how many are violent offenders as opposed to non-violent offenders?
Of the 17?
Of the 17 that were released today.
Yeah, so the question, again, we're still doing all our background checks right now on these 17. We don't have that information, but trust me, when I got that information, you were going to be the second person to know about it, because I think the community should know who these 17 people are and what their backgrounds are. Just literally, this is breaking news. You got to just give us some time. Will it be later tonight, tomorrow? At some point, we will get that information out, because it's important for the community to know exactly what took place today and the whole lack of outlook for public safety. And trust me, you will get that information. It just isn't going to be right now. We are literally looking into all the backgrounds as we speak.
Among the 17, and especially among the 5, can you give us a rough sketch of what crimes we're talking about?
I honestly don't know. I don't know. They're felonies, convicted felons. Put it that way. It's not good.
Are we expecting more to be released? I mean, this kind of came as a surprise to you guys. Are you guys concerned there may be more releases?
Easy answer to that, we have no idea. We don't get notified. We have no idea. So we're not the ones to ask that question.
Is this something that the sheriff's office from the jail can flag to local law enforcement?
We can, and often there's investigations going on related to some of these parolees that are being held on technical violations. We have current open investigations on some of them, and we're counting on knowing where they will be when we are ready to lodge those new charges, right? And now we're going to have to start over from scratch. And now you'll see things like the Viper Task Force ending up looking for these people out in the community because we no longer know where they are.
What does this overall do to the ability to fight crime?
You guys feel free to speak.
Let me say one other thing about our local parole officers are wonderful people. We were working in partnership with our local parole officers on these open cases. What Albany did, they didn't tell the local Rochester office this was coming until after it happened, is my understanding. And then they called us to apologize that these people were released, because nobody knew, there was no communication. We have the utmost respect and partnership with our local parole office. This didn't come from those guys. It came from Albany, and the question becomes, well, who knew and who didn't know? But it's my understanding our local parole officers had no idea this was coming, because we could have worked together and kept some of them from walking out the door today.
Assuming this policy continues, can warnings come from the jail, or from the parole officers, or from some combination?
Look, you're talking to the wrong people here, okay? You need to go ask the people who passed the law, support this law. There's offices all around here of who those people are. You really should go over there and ask them, because we can't tell you what tomorrow looks like. Nobody's even told us. But there's people that voted for this, and you should probably go ask for them who crafted this law. what their intent was, and what are the unintended consequences that we're now facing. The local law enforcement community is sitting here at 3:30 talking about something we have no idea what we're talking about because nobody's talked to us. And so I would encourage you to leave here and go to those offices and go track those guys down.
But could it be 5 more or 17 more or 22 more tomorrow?
No.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know. We didn't know about the 17 or the 22 today. So what tomorrow brings, it's really a parole issue. Their officers are here. I mean, why were they released? Who released them? On whose authority? Tomorrow, we don't know. I mean, there could be people who are being released tonight that are, potentially wanted for other serious crimes that we're trying to put together packages for them to be able to recharge them with additional crimes. And if they're out on the street, all of our officers are out running around trying to find them when we should be doing other things. And I think the point that needs to be made is that the community, the victims of this, that Chief Ambretto had said, the victims of these crimes, Grant, the technical violations are one thing, but were these family members notified that these parolees are out of custody? Were these witnesses made aware that these parolees are being released? So they, whether they're out on the street and they've got to worry about retribution on their side? Those are all questions I think need to be asked, and we in law enforcement, our job is to try and protect and serve our communities. And how are we going to do that when we don't even know the people that we just arrested that are in custody are being released? So those are answers that we have. So we ask that they be asked.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.